Hello, welcome to the Dr. Kirsten Show. This is going to be a different podcast episode. It's going to be what I'm calling a raw, what does Dr. K really think episode. And I think I'm going to be doing a lot more of these. Um, so today what we're going to talk about is I keep seeing posts, and I've seen this from now like multiple different practitioners that have said something along the lines of people who are experiencing depression or anxiety just need to get outside and move more and like get more exercise, and that would solve the problem. And I am just like, I have so much to say. I just don't even know where to start. I First off, let me start off with this. I do think obviously that exercise is important. It is definitely something that can help you feel better in many cases. And so I will say that, like, yes, if you are very sedentary, and you don't have a good like exercise routine, oftentimes just getting outside and going for a walk can have a very significant impact on how you feel. And I get that. But the problem that I have with a lot of these posts specifically is that they just say it as this like blanket statement of like, if you were to move more, you wouldn't be depressed or you wouldn't have anxiety. And I like it just bothers me so much. I'm going to try not to swear because I'm just so irritated by this. But let's talk about some of the different causes that of depression and anxiety that are often not discussed. And I'm also going to frame this too with postpartum depression, both and here, and also postpartum anxiety. There's a lot of things that happen in that time frame, but this is, the overarching depression and anxiety. If you experience any, version of these, let's talk about some of the different causes of depression and anxiety that are exercise alone is not necessarily going to fix. Okay, so I think a really good place to start would be at least symptoms of like postpartum depression, anxiety, even depression and anxiety just as a whole. Obviously, depressed mood where maybe you don't want to get out of bed, maybe you feel like you just want to hide in a hole. Keep in mind that that's also a dorsal vagal response, meaning that your nervous system is not just in fight or flight, but it's gone so far past that it is so dysregulated that literally want to hide from the world. That's definitely something to just keep in mind is when that has happened. There's quite a bit that needs to be done in order to get your nervous system to a place where it is regulated and wants to be around people again and feels safe. There's so much going on there just in that alone, but also, um, not necessarily experiencing joy or pleasure in most activities, even things that you typically would have liked to do. And I think this is really important to talk about, especially in postpartum, because there are so many changes that happen. And of course, you're tired. Of course, there are things like you're learning how to take care of a kid or multiple kids. And and there's a lot of not only emotional space being taken up and stretching, but also a lot of mental space and stretching that's being taken up there too. So, I think if you're starting to notice, like, it may not mean that you absolutely have postpartum depression, but I do think it is important to note that, like, if you notice that, like, the things that typically made you happy to do, that you like to do, um, are not really feeling that way anymore. And then also on top of that, you're not finding new ways of things to bring you joy. You're not feeling happy throughout your day at all, like with anything, then that might be a time to really look and see if maybe you might need to get some support, right? Also too, maybe you might notice that like just getting everyday things, activities done is just it feels impossible to do, right? Like not only is the laundry stacking up and the dishes stacking up, but like it feels like a momentous mile to just get a few things done, or maybe you're noticing you're not showering, right? Like there's a lot of things just to be paying attention to that may seem like everyday things that if you're not getting them done, this could be a sign that maybe there's something else going on there. Again, not just in postpartum depression, but also in depression too. Insomnia, which is really interesting, right? So like not being able to sleep, staying up, maybe not being able to fall asleep, maybe waking up and not being able to fall asleep again. Obviously with kiddos that does happen just simply because they are there waking you up a lot. But if you're noticing that your sleep is very disrupted and you're not being able to fall back asleep, definitely something to be taking a look deeper at. And lots of different causes for that we can definitely talk about as well. Like if you're noticing any fluctuations in weight, like that are abnormal, right? So significant weight loss or weight gain could be because you're not eating, right? That could be one reason, or it could be that your one of your coping mechanisms is eating a lot. I know too in the postpartum phase, one of the things that can happen is that we can tend to be craving sugary, carby type foods. So there can be some causes there. And I'm not saying that's bad, right? There's a balance that happens. And in future episodes, we're actually going to talk about hormones and we're going to talk about cravings and we're going to talk about all of that, which can be very, very important inside of postpartum and finding some sort of balance, especially when hormones are everywhere. But anyway, if you've noticed significant weight loss or weight gain, it could be because of eating habits and how our coping mechanisms are geared towards not eating at all or eating foods that can tend to cause weight gain. As well as there can be a lot of loss of energy, right? You could feel very fatigued and tired. But then here's where some of the other pieces, like um, exercise alone, is not going to solve this problem, right? So, feelings of worthlessness, if you have this and you feel like you're never enough, and anything that you do, and we're going to talk about this a little bit deeper in just a second, but feeling this like worthlessness, like that. You can't do anything right. You are always at fault. If you feel like what makes you happy or makes you worthy of earning your keep, in a sense, is by getting things done and accomplishing your to-do list, or any version of that. Like if you are not achieving and you are not successful, then you are not worthy. If there's anything tied to that, one of the things like this can definitely happen inside of depression, but then postpartum depression, this is a really, really big one. And actually, if this is you, I have a course called Worthy. It's $67, so it's not super expensive, and it's all designed to help you get to the root of actually knowing and believing that you are worthy. And I actually walk you through an entire subconscious reprogramming and rewiring exercise to be able to do this for yourself. It's such a powerful mini breakthrough session, and you can do it at any time. You once you purchase it, you have it, and it's a couple hours of just a decent amount of reframing, as well as just a really, really in-depth, awesome training to get started, and then you can move from there. But other things too, right? Like reduce self-esteem, reduce self-confidence. You might also notice that maybe you have a really hard time focusing that maybe wasn't there before. Like it's just really hard to concentrate. And of course, too, if there's any sort of thoughts around suicide, which can happen quite a bit in postpartum, like thinking like kids will be better without you, anything like that, right? These are all things that we want to be very aware of. And so this is one of the reasons why it gets me just really ramped up when I see posts that are like exercise alone is gonna solve the problems. Because the thing is that like what's going on in the brain, and especially too, if you've been here for a while or if you're new here, one of the things we talk so much about is that if especially if you've ever dealt with a chronic illness, you know that your thoughts and your way of thinking drives so much of chronic health conditions. This is just something that is just known. Like you may not know it, but this is something to start really looking at. And especially if you've had a chronic illness for a long time, if you've ever thought, like I'm broken or my body's broken or I'm never going to figure this out, or you have perfectionism tendencies, people pleasing tendencies, really hard time setting boundaries. If you also feel like you are really self-critical or even pessimistic, right? All of these things are thoughts that can actually end up leading to patterns that cause chronic conditions. And you see, here's the thing, let me make that step for you, right? So like one of the reasons how that happens is because like especially in perfectionism or people pleasing, what can tend to happen, or even being really self-critical, right? We're usually when we're like that, when we say those things, those when we're very self-critical, we may not be talking to ourselves very kindly, and your body responds to that. Your cells respond to that, because and they've done plenty of studies where you can see the brain light up and you can see how the brain responds to different words and different phrases. And it's really fascinating. But also too, like, I want you to think about it in this way. Like, if you were to think about a time that you were really, really anxious or you were really, really, really afraid and you like pull that up in your mind, oftentimes what can happen is you can feel it somewhere in your body. Like you might notice like your hands get tingly, or you might notice that your stomach starts to like get super tight or butterflies, right? So like what we think and how our brain responds can actually be felt in all of our cells, which then means that depending on how we're thinking, like if we're very self-critical or we're really, really negative, your body will respond in that way, right? It will respond to that. Similarly, if we are very on the people-pleasing side or the perfectionism side, or we really struggle to set boundaries, or we don't know where to find a balance between times when we have like uh we've set up that like we need to meet everybody else's needs over our own, and we don't know how to meet our own needs at in tandem with at the same time as also meeting other people's needs. It can be a both and, not an or. Again, the worthy breakthrough session is like the best thing for that. I'm going to have a link below for that, but this is something that we talk about, which is meeting your own needs and the importance of that, because what can often tend to happen is people can tend to want other people to meet their needs for them, and that is exhausting for the other person. And it can lead to a lot of breakdowns in relationships, and it's just something to be very aware of with your kids too, if you are expecting them to be meeting some sort of need for you. So one of the very, very just tenets of mental well-being is meeting your own needs first, and and we can do that at the same time as meeting needs for others. So again, all of these different traits, right, can lead to chronic conditions in the body, but they can also lead to depression. They can set you up for depression, anxiety, and can also kind of precede and into postpartum depression, because like thinking about it this way, like when you get into postpartum, talking about the first like 6 to 12 weeks, but also can be up to a year or more after you gave birth. There's so much change that happens. There's such a stretch, there's so much adaptation, and there's so much mental and emotional stretching that happens during this time that it can sneak up on you where you're not even necessarily paying attention. Then all of a sudden one day you're just like, oh my gosh, I like don't even know. I don't even know what way is up. um so just paying attention to like sometimes, and I talk about this a lot. I created a course called Mindset for Motherhood, which may be changed to Functional Motherhood depending on when you listen to this. It may be titled different things, but one of the things we talk about in that course, and we do, is we give moms the tools to be able to meet their own needs, but also to be able to work themselves through those times where you might be very overwhelmed, or you might feel like that mental well-being is maybe not so great that day, or you're just going through a really tough time. It's one of the things that I wish more women would do when they were pregnant to set themselves up for better success in the postpartum phase, because so many women and moms don't have those tools that then when you're going through it, it's just so much harder if you don't have any sort of framework to fall back on, that to support you on this side, right? Like imagine not really knowing that any of this stuff is under there, but then all of a sudden when you have this kiddo and you have laundry piling up and you have dishes piling up and your husband is, maybe he works from home or maybe he's going to come home and then he's going to see this like mess of a house, you will start to find those areas where you really tie your ability to get things done to your worthiness and to being enough. You will find all of it. And just imagine now you're also dealing with a little kiddo, trying to figure out how to raise them, trying to figure out how do you even spend your day with them. All of these things, they're crying, they're doing all this, like it's a lot, right? It's a lot. So if you don't have, and you're just, if you are in overwhelm and, you're just feeling like that is how you're spending a lot of your days, if you don't have tools to help you manage that, like, what are we even doing? Right? Like, how can we get you those tools so that you can actually be able to enjoy your time that you are going through raising your kid? So, okay, I kind of went on a tangent there, but I this is why it's just like so important for me to do this in a podcast episode, because there's so much nuance to all of this that it's really just like there's so many different factors and there's so many different layers that go into what can cause depression and anxiety. So and also like exercise alone is not going to fix that. I It's just not, right? Okay, so then other things, other reasons where, or other reasons or causes behind depression are things like really stressful or traumatic events. And this could be from a long, 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 long time ago when you were a kid. That's one of the things that has sort of followed me for a very long time is I sort of erred a little bit more towards this side, just because of things that happened when I was a kid. Um, and, the thing is like, and this is where it just drives me crazy because, like, as many of you know, I've been an athlete all of my life. I just, finished up a lot of time in triathlon, which is not over. I'll probably get back into it, but I have had a life in exercise. And up until that point, I had been doing CrossFit, super, super, super fit, but like exercise alone does not solve the underlying issues that are there, period. Um, so, but then also too, if you ever go through like a divorce or financial stress, or maybe somebody very close to you dies, or there's some or other very stressful or traumatic event that happens. Maybe you get extremely burned out at work, and then that just sort of takes things down a road that you weren't expecting to go down. These are all things that can definitely bring up depression and anxiety. And again, like exercise alone is not necessarily going to solve those, right? Also, other causes too can be like imbalances in serotonin and dopamine. These can sometimes, I'll go two ways with this. One is that when we have stress, and we have a significant amount of stress, what will often happen is your adrenals will take care of it for a certain amount of time. So cortisol will be released by your adrenals and it will take care of that stress and it'll keep you going for some time, right? But then eventually what can happen is what after we've gotten through that point, it can start to show up in your neurotransmitters. We can run a test or a panel to see how your neurotransmitters are doing. And if we see an imbalance in norepinephrine and epinephrine, and if there's an imbalance in the ratio of the two, and also if there's low serotonin, what that can really give us a lot of insight into is that how your brain and your body is responding to stress is it's tired. We don't call it adrenal fatigue anymore. It was like a long, long time ago, a couple decades ago, that adrenal fatigue was like the way that way that it was called, but it's not an official diagnosis, and using adrenal fatigue, people get all like wonky about, which is fine. But essentially, like the way to look at it is just like your body has been dealing with stress for so long that it's no longer being able to handle it well. And now we're starting to see imbalances that are kicking in. So imagine, right, like you have like let's say, imagine you have low serotonin and you have depression, and your body is not being able to make enough serotonin or dopamine because it doesn't have enough of the precursors and because it's just really, really exhausted. The system is exhausted from dealing from stress, but you're still in the time, like you still haven't dealt with how you feel about the divorce, or you still haven't dealt with the grief or the process of the processing the death of someone that you love, or you still like the financial problems are still there, or abuse has happened, or, even times when you were a kid, if that has never been looked at or addressed, right? Like all of these things can catch up with you at a certain point, and then that can be when we start to see imbalances in serotonin. So what will often happen, right, is people get put on a medication to help boost serotonin, but or to help with dopamine, but it's not really necessarily solving the root problem in the first place, right? The other thing too to keep in mind here as well is that gut health plays into this too, because so much of the body's serotonin, like I've seen stats saying like 90% of the serotonin that's produced in the body comes from the bacteria in your gut. So imbalances here in the GI tract, in the microbiome, the types of bacteria that are living in your gut, which if you are eating a standard American diet and is really high in processed foods, I guarantee you you're going to have imbalances in the GI tract, in the microbiome. Um, Whether that's an overgrowth or an undergrowth, but either way, if you don't have the right bacteria there, it can lead to imbalances in your brain chemistry and in what's produced, serotonin, things like that, that are primarily produced in the gut, right? So if you can tell, like what we're doing here is we're actually setting up a much larger picture than just depression, and it's a much larger picture than just exercise will solve the problem. Now, I will say this, going out for a walk, getting out in the sunlight, making sure you're eating really, really good, healthy food, all of those things are going to impact your gut bacteria. Those things, even going outside, being in the sunlight, we know that that can impact your gut bacteria. We also know that going for a walk and movement and getting exercise is something that is very, very critical for um, overall health, right? We know this. Also, vitamin D, right? Getting outside, seeing sunlight, that's going to impact your gut. It's going to impact your brain. It's going to impact your muscles, your bones, your immune system. So many things are impacted by seeing the sun, getting vitamin D, all that, right? And nutrition, of course, all of that is going to play a role too. If we eat food that gives us energy, like there's a lot of data, right, that can come from nutrients and nutrition from nutrient dense foods, which eating the rainbow, right, colorful foods, lots of healthy organic, if possible, fruits and veggies, as healthy of meat as you can if you eat animal meat. All of these things are going to have a really significant impact. Getting enough fiber in your diet, right? Some of these are very basic standard things that will have an impact on your mental health and your physical health. So I'm not bypassing or discounting any of those things. They are a very important piece. But what I am saying is that, like, it's not just one of those things oftentimes that's going to solve all of the problems. It's usually creating a life or a lifestyle that promotes vitality, and it's making that entire life shift that helps to do that. And getting to the root of a lot of those like mental the things that go on in the we call it the mental body. So you have like your physical body and then your mental body, and then we have the emotional body and the energetic body. But with things that are going on in that mental body, as far as the perfectionism tendencies, the people pleasing tendencies, the self criticism, the negativity, low self esteem, worthlessness, right? Always feeling like we're guilty or at fault, those things, or shame, right? All of these are going to play a role in what's going on up here, and that will translate down into the rest of the body, not just in your energetic and emotional body, but also in your physical body as well. Other things too that oftentimes are missed that are not normally talked about are copper and zinc deficiencies. So if you have any imbalances in minerals, that can affect your nervous system as well. And it's interesting because I've been seeing a heck of a lot more. Gosh, another one. I have a course called Reclaim. It's a 5-day nervous system reset that is free. And one of the things we talk about is making sure that you are eating really good nutrient dense food. Again, talking about eating the rainbow, colorful foods, and also getting foods and even sometimes taking supplements to help you get more of some of these things. Because if you have mineral deficiencies, like including magnesium, um, it, uh, it can be hard to get enough magnesium, especially if you're in a time of like high stress. But it can also be one of the things that is essential for a healthy nervous system. So you could be doing all of the like nervous system tools and like tapping your chest or doing EFT, the tapping stuff, right? And you can be doing all sorts of those things. But if you are deficient in certain types of minerals, um, most likely it's going to be really hard to actually get your nervous system to feel balanced. And I will say this, if you also have uh, imbalances in breathing patterns, it's going to be really hard to balance the nervous system there too, because breathing influences the vagus nerve, which is part of the communicator between the gut and the brain. And it will trigger you into, in a good way, into parasympathetic nervous system when it's balanced. And the way that we do that in many cases is through breathing. So going back to deficiencies that are oftentimes not talked about with postpartum depression, or depression in general, is these mineral deficiencies. So like copper and zinc. If you have low copper and zinc, or if you have low magnesium, these all can lead to depression symptoms. So, and so commonly not checked, right? So commonly not checked. And it's again, it drives me nuts because, okay, you know what exercise is going to do? Exercise, if you have a deficiency in these, will if especially if you think like, okay, I'm not going to go out and do gentle exercise. Like, let's say I'm going to go for a run, or I'm going to go do CrossFit or whatever, or you can also over exercise, and it can put in even more stress on the system. Um, and then that can even still lead to more deficiencies because remember, right? Like in order for the body to be able to handle any sort of level of stress, it has to have the nutrients to be able to do that. So I just I guess how I'm going to end this, hopefully any of this and all of this was helpful for you. If you're wondering like, well, how do I know if I have a deficiency? Like, okay, well, this is super helpful, but like how would I know? There are certain labs and tests that can be run, harder to get through your typical general practitioner, but there are tests where you can look a little bit deeper into like how your body and your brain are using up minerals and vitamins and all of that. The one that I personally like a lot is the Nutraval by Genova Diagnostics. There are ways that you can get it and order it on your own. Um, but it's going to be really hard to read if you don't have the education behind it. But you can in some cases get your hands on that. It does require a blood panel, and it does also require a urine sample. But it's one test that I use a lot with my clients, because it's one way that we can look for some of those deeper deficiencies, um, and and just see what's going on there. So anyway, I think the thing that I want to end this and wrap this up with is if you are first off on the internet and you are seeing things that are like, oh, just exercise more, or, oh, just sleep more, or, oh, if you aren't sleeping enough, then it's going to create an inflammation. And then, that's going to lead to these health outcomes. But you are straight in the middle of postpartum and your kid is waking you up multiple times a night. So, of course, your sleep is disrupted. Like, there's just a time to be, like, looking at things on the internet and be like, first off, I'm not in that season, so I'm gonna do what I can to support my body while I know that, like, inflammation is potentially gonna be higher because I am being woken up a lot more, so I know that sleep is really important. I know that managing my mindset and my load that I put on my body from other things is a really good thing to be mindful of. Like, maybe we could incorporate in some, like, gentle walking, maybe some yoga in with some of the, like, more high intensity activities. That's all fine, but, like, let's just be aware that, like, depending on how hard we go, it just might create even more stress for your body, which then may lead to breakdown faster. Just things to be aware of, right? But also too, like, let's also be aware that, like, on the internet, there are people who just like me, right? Just like me, because I run a business here, um, that are putting out content to help you get into either their programs or the way that they help people. So I don't want to say that, like, physical therapists and people who are personal trainers that are saying that exercise is going to solve all problems are necessarily bad. It's just that, especially when it's so one toned, like, there are so many more things that are oftentimes going on beyond just that, that let's think a little more critically. Let's think in a little more um, depth a little more depth around how the body functions. And as you guys know, holistically treating the body is, like, my thing. This is how we look at health. This is how we look at creating vitality for the long term. This is how we look at aging well, longevity. So, biggest takeaways here are, number one, like, make sure you are getting exercise and movement. Make sure you're also eating as good enough food as possible. I know moms tend to under eat food, so, like, just eating the crusts of your kiddos' sandwiches is not enough food. You need to be eating enough food in your day, and a wide variety of food, a wide variety of colorful foods. Let's make sure that you are actually fueling your body, right? Getting yourself enough nutrients and nutrient dense foods. So make sure you're also staying hydrated. Make sure that you're also, eating some foods that are going to support your gut, like yogurts and fermented foods like sauerkraut and all sorts of fermented foods, kimchis, things like that. So are all going to be really, really helpful for supporting that bacteria and generating the types of bacteria that are going to um, boost serotonin. But let's also make sure too here that, like, we're not missing, like, if you notice that, like, on a daily basis you are not feeling like you're enough, if you notice that you're feeling like you are not worthy of having support, of receiving support, if you notice that you don't feel like you're worthy of, like, if you don't accomplish the things in your day and that to-do list is just like, it owns your life, um, let's take a look at those patterns. Let's also, if you find that you have low self-esteem or perfectionism or people-pleasing tendencies or negativity or are super self-critical, all of these things are underlying patterns that can lead to chronic conditions, like not just, postpartum depression or anxiety, but they can also lead to things like autoimmune disease and some of the other, like, and other things like eczema and psoriasis and endometriosis, a big one there, PCOS, right? We're much more significant chronic conditions than you would think. Hypothyroidism being a really big one too here for women as well, right? So, okay, that's where I'm going to wrap it up. So I mentioned a couple of different programs that are available, and I'm going to have those links in the show notes for you if you're interested in checking any of those out. If you have any questions on this, or if you found this really helpful, like, definitely make sure to reach out. I'm going to do more of these where they're just sort of me, like, offshooting, like, things I see that drive me freaking crazy on the internet. And if you are enjoying this type of episode, I would love to know. Okay, I will see y'all for the next one soon. Take care.